Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about 5 Ackie Monitor mistakes I see very commonly in the hobby. So let's get to it, and we'll start at number 5. So I wanted to start off number 5 with one that I see all too often, and that if you're going to take away one thing from this video, it would be this one, and that's immediately cohabbing. When I got into Ackies, I made quite a few mistakes, and one of them was I got Asus and Dell at the same time and tried cohabbing immediately, and you really need some experience understanding Ackie Monitor behavior and warning signs if they're going to get into a little bit of an argument that might turn deadly. You want to understand those things before you do it. Now, there is the potential to cohab. It depends on who you're mixing. Most commonly pairs are kept together, but you really want to experience one in their lonesome first before getting to that. So that's a very important thing I want you guys to take away. Basically, the condensed thought here is that I'm not saying never cohab. I will kind of elaborate on cohabbing and circumstances around that, but I'm not saying never cohab. I'm just saying don't start out cohabbing. So many people ask right off the bat, should I get one or two? To me, the answer should almost always definitely be get one if you're just starting out with Ackies. Now, to quickly elaborate on which circumstances cohabbing might be right for you, the biggest one is that you're intending to breed. Most often than not, cohabbed Ackies are actually pairs that are continuously together and breeding. I don't really see too many female and female together, which is probably the only other one that might work. Male to male will never work. I don't really think there's too much benefit, though, if you're doing female and female. I really think the only real benefit is having a male and female together because there's an intended purpose. There are some really cool interactions, though, between Ackies, so I do understand the intrigue in seeing that behavior. So I'm not going to really say there's no reason to cohab Ackies other than breeding, but just be careful. Be knowledgeable about the circumstances and approach it in a very cautious way. But enough on that topic, let's move on to number 4. A basking gradient is very important. Ackies like to use different ranges of temperatures. This is why you see a lot of Ackie Monitor keepers using a retest stack. It's because it provides different temperature ranges depending on where the Ackie goes in. You don't need to necessarily use a retest stack, though. I don't, but I do provide different layers and ranges where my Ackies can bask. That's what's most important here, is being able to provide different ranges where they can bask depending on what kind of temperature range they're feeling. I have actually been thinking about making a retest stack, though, so if you want me to go ahead and do that, make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner and hit the bell as well so you're notified when I go ahead and make that video. One mistake I see somewhat commonly done by keepers that goes kind of against the gradient idea is only having one basking bulb. I think it's really helpful to have 2 basking bulbs because that widens the gradient and widens the range, and also allows you to do more with the basking site below and provide more of a range and different gradient of layers for temperature. So ultimately, while I don't think you're going to see a direct impact by really focusing on the design of the basking site, making sure you have different vertical layers and making sure you use 2 bulbs instead of 1, I do think it improves the quality of life for the Ackie, and ultimately in the long run might help them out a bit in terms of longevity. So I really do think this is important. A lot of the single bulb enclosures I see in those 4x2x2 size enclosures that I'm not really a fan about. Like, you guys know this, I'm not a big fan of those enclosures. I think minimal for an adult you need is 5x2.5 by 3 foot, but I'm not going to get into that too much during this video since that's somewhat controversial for the Ackie Monitor community. It's also important to remember the gradient outside of the basking site. You do want a low-end temperature. I don't really measure a high-end temperature since that's pretty much just the gradient on the high end. It's really diverse, so I don't really measure that too much. People ask me what my high-end temperature is, and I don't really have an answer for them. I just give the highest point for basking temperature and the low end, and that's usually enough. Well, I guess I usually give the range of the gradient of the basking site, where I have the highest point being 160, and then the lowest point before it starts to normalize being in the 90s. So that's usually what I give for the high end. Anyway, enough about basking sites. Let's get on to number 3, guys. Okay, so I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about enclosure size. Sorry, guys. I try not to harp on this too much since, like I said, I know it's kind of controversial, but I'm really particular about the height of enclosures. To me, it's not functionally possible to have a 2-foot tall enclosure. At minimum, I can't see anything less than 3 foot in height. Now let me explain my position. Adults need at least a foot of substrate. Females probably need a little bit more, or at least a lay box area where it's a little bit deeper than 12 inches. I think even that's a little bit too short, to be honest. I have about 2 feet of substrate in mine. I think about 18 inches is a sweet spot all around for any adult Ackie. But I could compromise to a foot of substrate, and why that's important over having something like 6 inches or something less than 12 inches is because Ackies need to fully submerge themselves in their substrate to help with their sheds and get that humidity they require. It's very hard to maintain humidity levels in an enclosure with under a foot of substrate. You really got to focus on spraying it down a lot more. It's just really hard and difficult to maintain, and I don't really think you're going to have that great of sheds in something with 12 inches or less of substrate. On top of that, I like to give at least a foot of airspace where they could climb. They are kind of semi-arboreal, I guess you can call them. I don't know, but they do like and enjoy their climbing, and it's a very good use of space in the enclosure, especially if you have a smaller size enclosure and can't really go all out. You do want to give them some range to do some climbing activities. Great for enrichment too. So far we have 2 feet. We have a foot in height for the vertical climbing space, and we have 12 inches of substrate. So why do you need the extra foot? It's because you need to keep distance between the back of the Ackie Monitor and the UVB. You do not want them getting too close. That's not good for them. For example, the 2 plausible choices from Arcadia are the 12% and 14%. 12% per Arcadia recommends being no closer than 12 inches from the back of the Ackie Monitor or the Reptile you're choosing, and if you're using the 14%, you have to be 15 plus inches from the back of your Reptile. So basically, with all that together, you need at least 3 foot of vertical space. Even if you were kind of slack in one of those areas, the vertical space or the substrate, that's still really, you're gonna have like maybe 2 inches of substrate or something, or only have a couple inches of vertical space, because you need definitely that amount of space for the UVB, and then you kind of got to break that up between the rest for the other foot. Anyway, I know there's going to be disagreement here, and feel free to constructively put disagreements in the description, or in the comments, because I always welcome that. I'm not perfect, and my husbandry is definitely not perfect. I'm always growing, but it's good to have a discussion on this. I just hope you at least acknowledge my point and give some thought to it. I'm not trying to be like this is the only way, but I'm really passionate about this idea, if you get what I mean. All I'll say is, in the end, we want to do what's best for these guys, I hope. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm not really trying to be authoritative or anything like that. So I hope you guys understand. Let's get off this topic and move on to number 2. Okay, so I think this is one enclosure topic we can pretty much agree upon as an Ackie Monitor community. Glass enclosures really do not work well at all for these guys. At most, I think a glass terrarium is only acceptable when using it as a temporary setup. Maybe you're cleaning out an enclosure. Maybe you're transitioning from different enclosures, you're moving them into a new one, you gotta do some setup. I temporarily have the baby Ackies that just hatched in a 40-gallon terrarium. My AP enclosure order is running a little bit late. I expected it to be here by now. Not greatest excuse, but I don't think a week or 2 in a 40-gallon for newly hatched babies is going to be that bad. I really rigged it too to be good with humidity, so I'm not too worried about that. The only other situation I could think of is if you require sterile environment for an Ackie that might have been injured. That's an excuse I've used in the past, to use a glass enclosure just to keep them on some paper towels for a couple days or so. Sometimes that's necessary, although rarely. But yeah, there's so many things wrong with using a glass terrarium that's just the opposite of what Ackie Monitors require. Number 1, it has the incorrect dimensions. I don't think any Akkie's gonna thrive in any glass terrarium unless you very much customize the dimensions, which I don't know why you would do. Additionally, like I said, humidity can be a big problem in glass terrariums, especially with the screens on top. That's just really hard to maintain proper humidity levels in the substrate, which Ackie Monitors require. Lastly, it's a pain in my butt to rig the UVB for one of those screen glass enclosures. I have no clue how you can hang it inside and then close it on the wire, or you put it over top and it's too far away. There is just so many problems that I'm annoyed. I hate glass terrariums in general. I don't use them at all. I have like 5 in my garage just sitting there because I'm so sick of them. So yeah, I would not use a glass terrarium if you're getting an Ackie. Get something wooden or PVC built, customized. You could do it yourself. I have a DIY build in the description below. I am not that handy. You guys could definitely do it even if it's your first time building something. So check that out. It's in a Google Doc. All right, guys, so let's get to number 1. This one is oh so important for female Ackie Monitor health. So definitely pay attention here, especially if you have a female. One of the biggest cause of deaths in Ackie monitors is a female becoming egg-bound. It happens so often. That's one of the dire warnings that a lot of veterans keeping Ackies warn newbies when they come in. And this is part of the reason I'm such a big advocate for proper substrate death. Females need particular situations to lay eggs, and yes, they do lay eggs even if not bred. They can lay infertile eggs. Oh, and by can, I mean they will. But yes, females require a temperature around 86 degrees in the substrate. That's where they'll aim to lay their eggs. That's why Ackie monitor breeders incubate their eggs around 86 degrees. They also look for a place that's 86 degrees and consistently moist and humid. They really look for that requirement. An Ackie monitor female who has laid at least one clutch 2 will be a lot more picky, and they will definitely look for that exact spot, and that's really hard to keep in improper environments. So make sure you take this seriously if you have a female Ackie. It really is one of the leading cause of deaths in the species that I've seen. And if you're not going to provide a proper substrate death, at least make a lay box that you could put in the enclosure or rig somehow for the female to use when she's getting a little chunky. And one last note on this topic to make you guys feel a little bit better if you are now worrying about your female Ackie, take an IR gun, the temp gun, and then dig down a little bit in your substrate. It's usually around the basking spot that you'll find that sweet spot of 86 degrees, about several inches down in the substrate, maybe deeper, really depends on your setup. But dig down until you can read a temperature around 86. Make sure that area is actually humid and moist, and check that for several days and see if it keeps around that same temperature and that same humidity level. And by humidity level, I mean just make sure it's moist there and it's not dry. If you see these conditions happening over several days, you're probably good. Just keep doing the same husbandry stuff you're doing in terms of keeping it humid, adding moisture in there, exchanging the bulbs, and you'll probably be fine and not have any egg-bound problems. And if you're concerned your female is egg-bound, get her to a vet ASAP. Alright guys, so that wraps up this video. Let me know of what you think in the comments. Should I do a Tegu version? Let me know. Let's get on to a couple announcements before wrapping up. Shout out to you amazing patrons Kat and Rick, Mahan's Bioactive Reptiles, Brian B, Herp M, Angela L, and David T. I really appreciate your support. You guys too can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. Check the top right for more information. Support the channel by checking out the merch in the description. There's a Teespring link. I have 4 different designs just wearing my logo today, but we have a Tegu version, we have a Bearded Dragon version, and a Ackie Monitor version. I should know that because that's the topic of today's video, but that will be to the left of my head, right to your screen. Again, check the description for more information. Okay guys, I'll see you Wednesday for the next video post. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.